Welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Water Connections webinar series. I'm your host, Richard Restuccia, and I'm going to be talking about something today that is really near and dear to my heart, and that is trees, and more importantly, how we take care of our trees. I think probably most of us are in a position when we buy a property that we inherit trees that are already on the property, and then we have to figure out how to take care of them. We don't necessarily set them up properly for irrigation. We're not even sure what the species are because we weren't there when they were planted. And as a result, it creates quite a challenge, I think, for most homeowners, landscapers, and commercial property managers. So helping us through this today is Joey Lynn with Dr. Q's House Calls. And let me tell you, I just learned of Joey a little while back on one of my trips to Star Nursery. And boy, does she have a great reputation. And as I talked to her and I learned about her knowledge, one of the things that I really appreciated about her was she literally goes on house calls every day to advise people on what to do about their trees. So there's one thing that is a classroom learning, right? She is a certified arborist, but the experience we get out in the field, and Joey's literally done hundreds and hundreds of visits, that value of that is really great and important. And she's nice enough to share this knowledge that she's acquired over the years with all of you today. It's really generous of you, Joey, to do this. Joey, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled and honored to be here. And I hope that everybody can walk away with a few aha moments. So if you want to have a pad and paper and listen for them and write down three, that would make me happy.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's going to happen. So anyway, Joey, thanks. So I was wondering, Joey, if you wouldn't share with everybody how you got started in this industry.
Well, it's really interesting. I had absolutely no experience in this industry. Growing up here in Las Vegas, we grew thickets. We had a Bermuda lawn and we would have to pick the thickets out of our dog. And so as I was raising my children, I was a stay-at-home mom. I was asked to actually go into one of the retail star nurseries here and work just as customer service, as a salesperson in customer service. And I quickly fell in love with the customer, first and foremost,
Yeah.
and understanding that they just needed somebody to listen and help them with their complete project. And that is how I learned. I learned all about projects and what people faced in their landscape, and then the passion for the trees and the shrubs, and really, really learning how to be an expert in those specific information. So that's how that happened. And then I quickly wanted to become a master gardener. I quickly then learned about being a certified arborist. I didn't even know what that was. And I had an incredible mentor, Dennis Swartzel, which you've had on the podcast in the webinar. And then it just grew from there. And I'm here now.
Yeah, that's a great story. And yeah, Dennis has been on, and what a intelligent person he is, especially on the subject of trees. Now, you have made hundreds of house calls over the years, and I always think about the 80-20 rule. We always see people doing right or have the same questions or the same issues. Have you seen a pattern with this in your house calls? What's the most common problems that you tend to see when you go on these house calls?
Well, the most common problem that I see with homeowners is the lack of understanding. What you don't know is hurting your trees. This picture right here is a house call I went on, and believe it or not, this homeowner wasn't even calling me about the tree standing right in front of you. They were calling me about that problem over there, which is number one, wrong plant for the wrong purpose in the wrong place. And that is a queen palm, which they don't do very well here anyway. We're too dry and the winds. But if you notice here, that is synthetic turf. They had an African sumac. They did a long conversion, And the synthetic turf they thought was a great idea. In the process of the tree starting to decline, then they started pruning it to death. And
Mm.
now the tree is sunburnt. And also in this little picture, you can see in the back here, this wonderful Mexican fan palm that they so lovingly pruned. So these are things that people just don't know, which is actually hurting themselves. And everything from water issues, and you can see the long list, problem of overwatering or underwatering, too frequent here. Soil problems. You would not believe how many people never even consider the soil. They do things like this synthetic turf, and they completely remove the ability to feed into that soil, let alone talk about pH. I don't understand that one, but they'll address the topic of pH when they have a pool and getting their chemicals right, but they don't consider that for a living thing. The pruning mistakes, this is one of the biggest problems we have because we don't have a tree service industry that can cover the extent of trees here in the valley. And the ones that we have are doing their best, but it could just be inherited bad practice. And then also pests and disease, either neglecting, learning about it, addressing it, identifying it wrong, or just throwing chemicals on a problem, thinking that they're doing good and using it as just a antibiotic for anything and really causing secondary problems.
Yeah, those are great points and very interesting. And I do want to remind everybody, we already have a question coming in, but I do have the Q&A open. So if you have some questions for Joey Lynn today about trees, please tap them into the Q&A and I'll ask when appropriate. Now, you mentioned that they have artificial turf, right? Just baking the soil, right? At 115 degrees on a Vegas day, that's might be 160, 170. But let's talk about, you said organic material. Can you actually put too much soil on top of tree roots and do damage?
Absolutely. When we do anything to change the current living conditions of that tree, we will encounter a problem, whether it's positive or negative. Too much of anything is a bad thing. Too much water, too much soil. So I always love to educate my homeowners on a seasonal approach
Hmm.
to adding any soil or mulching. If we can get the homeowner to even be aware of the steps to take for good soil management, I like doing it seasonally, early spring and early fall, adding some good organic matter, something that has a complete balance of some native, some organic mulch, anything to create pore space and break up that clay. We have a lot of clay out here. So if we can do it seasonally, we'd be adding a protection of to cool or maybe even reduce weeds throughout the season. And then we move into that really extreme season, which is summer or even winter. We're one step ahead, and we may never really face having to pile a bunch of soil on to make up for erosion or water runoff or anything like that.
Now, oftentimes in my gardens, I'll use compost as mulch, right? I mean, it holds 4 times its weight in water and it's a good nutrient for my plants. Should I be doing that with my trees?
You absolutely can, but understand that or the compost is a high hot nitrogen product. It's going to continue to decompose and cook itself, and we don't want to add too much of anything. So if you're going to use a compost, I recommend we incorporate it with some other planting material or some other mix or mulch or even native, but not a coating here of complete compost that's thick. Nitrogen heats up the roots. Our roots here for our trees are very surface and they're very fine. And so any of that could shock the tree. And we have a lot of desert trees out here that don't require a lot of nitrogen. They pull their nitrogen from the air. So if we're loading them, we could actually stress our trees out by adding too much rich organic matter.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. I really do try, trees are our most valuable asset on our landscapes, right? I can't imagine what it would cost me to replace some of the large trees on my property. So I treat them like they're glass.
Well,
It's
and they are. And that I think is another thing in our culture, our community here. This is a very transit disposable city. There's not a lot of longevity here. So we don't understand longevity in our plant products or our trees, that we've got a tree that has a lot of heritage and a lot of history and it's a lot of value. So we have to really teach people how to value their trees.
Yeah. And then I'm looking at some of these pruning mistakes that you have on here. And, like when we're cutting turf, we know, oh, don't take more than a third of the blade of grass. Are there some tips like that for pruning that we could think about?
Well, here I really, first of all, want everybody to understand the timing of their pruning. I think that we can do a lot of really great pruning with our deciduous trees. Those are trees that go dormant in the winter. They're a little bit more forgiving, but I never recommend anything more than 15%. Some of the standards will actually say that you can remove 20, 25%. But to really know that it's hard for people. So if we just start with any broken or diseased or crossing branches and we can just step back, take a look, sometimes that's even just sufficient. But I would say no more than 15 to 20% and know your season. Don't do a Palo Verde here in the valley end of October and you're taking off. People don't understand that we could get that really cold snap and you lose a Palo Verde because you over pruned it. People just don't really know their trees and what seasons is best for them.
Yeah. Okay. Great. That's good to know. And is there a general rule of thumb? I shouldn't prune my trees in the summer. I shouldn't in the winter.
No,
Is there a
it's
best?
it's typically right after their blooming season. If you have a blooming, let them bloom and then go ahead and remove what you need to remove. If it's deciduous, wait until it's dormant, go and approach everything in January. The reason we like January here is because our soil really never freezes. Our soil is always ready to take nutrients. So if we go ahead and prune our deciduous trees in January, we can get a lot of our organic matter down and our fertilizers or our acidifiers if we need to neutralize that pH. We can do all of that in January. And then for our desert trees, we really want to do that. I like to encourage you to do it before the monsoons happen
Yeah.
because our desert trees do a lot of canopy growth during monsoons. And if you have not done that yet and they take on that weight, once our winds come to, we see a lot of branch failure through winds,
Yeah.
as well as just the weight of what these desert trees take on in the monsoon season.
Yeah. So even with tree pruning, timing's everything, right?
Timing is everything. Yes.
So we're getting some questions about water now, and I always love these, and one's even kind of controversial. So I know you'll like that too. But
Okay.
uh, first question is, what do you recommend for water delivery methods to trees? Is there a type of irrigation you prefer?
I absolutely like the drip or even the inline. Um, some people are converting from a high pressure, high output sprinkler system to a low pressure. And I love the inline irrigation. It is something that still needs time on the clock. People don't understand that Netafim or Rainbird with their inline subsurface irrigation still needs quite a bit of time on the clock. Drip irrigation is just great. It's easy to add. If you know where your half-inch poly that's getting the water to that tree, you can easily add on to with just drip emitters that are 1/4 inch poly with the emitter at the end. I don't like adjustables. That's a controversial one. I really like you to have a set gallons per hour in a pressure compensated emitter. That is going to keep your pressure and flow even throughout. And you can monitor how much water. You can simply do the math. If I have four gallon per hour emitters and I'm running my tree irrigation for an hour, I know I'm getting 16 gallons at that time. And it's just a math equation.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you for saying
No
that. Now,
problem.
sometimes in a yard, somebody will have their spray heads or rotors watering their trees, and the tree trunks will get wet. Is that a good idea?
No, absolutely not. The trunk of the tree is created to protect that cambium layer. That cambium where the xylem and phloem and the water goes up and the nutrients from photosynthesis comes down, that needs to be protected. That is the job of the bark. When we constantly have water on the bark of our trees, we are introducing disease, insects, we are weakening the flow of nutrients. So absolutely not. We need a good area of no water. So there are actual emitters or nozzles for trees that will be at the edge of the tree that causes the water to go back the other way, that there are ways to have that head-to-head high pressure sprinkler irrigation. But I don't ever recommend any tree be in lawn. So if you have a tree in lawn, you should really reconsider. That's the irrigation is the sprinklers and hitting the bark of the tree is the least of your concerns. You have a bigger concern, which is a short, shallow root system, and the tree eventually will fail.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. So the other thing on this note is that there's some watering systems out there that really you dig down about 2 or 3 feet below the soil line and you put like a bubbler there or a emitter and you water below the soil line. What's your feeling about that type of irrigation?
If you can't see it, you can't monitor it. Here we have clay. So I'm not experienced with the bubbler that's 2 inches below. But in my work with the homeowner, my job is to educate them on how they can monitor and ensure that their trees are getting enough. The subsurface Netafin or Rainbird, that is pretty much, it's not so low that you can't get to it to monitor it. But any deep root flooding with a high clay content, I think you run the risk of that water not penetrating, not draining, and creating wet feet for your trees. So it is something that I don't think that I would necessarily recommend. But again, I don't have that much experience with that specific flooding. We do recommend flood irrigation here for people that have an existing high pressure and they've got the flood bubblers on there. And we do a lot of that, or using swales and things like that to get the water to channel in. But that is that's a very infrequent watering. That doesn't happen on a automatic timer that's happening multiple times a day or weeks, which is what homeowners tend to do out here. So bad habits
Yeah.
make some of the best scenarios really problematic because people just don't know. So my job is to educate the homeowner on the pros and cons and really what their limitations are and understanding how trees function and how irrigation really helps trees or hurts it.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. So, yeah, and I always think about this too, right? I think that in a root zone, more than 50%, close to 75% of the water is taken up in the top half of the root zone. So I was thinking about watering past the root zone to start with is it's kind of dangerous. So I definitely agree with you on this. So
Yeah.
we have a very specific question about Japanese cherry blossom. Are you familiar with this at all?
A Japanese cherry blossom? No, I'm not, but we do have our flowering plums, a lot of deciduous flowering trees here. So go for it. Let's see.
So they're asking about how do you prolong the life of a 25 footer in zone 5, receiving
Okay.
direct sunlight for most of the day in the spring and summer.
Okay, so that is not our zone. Our zone here that I specialize in is zone 9, 9A and B, even into 10. So when we talk about the full sun and how we help trees, we understand that we cannot do anything above when we're dealing with the temperature, right? We can't control that. So we then focus on our root health. My also, and timing of pruning of that tree, I think is really, really important. If you have a tree that is sun sensitive, that is possibly in the wrong zone, the wrong location, you want to make sure that that outer coating of that tree is well established and protected. So we don't do any of our real heavy pruning where we could get sunburn on the bark, but we go back to our soil management. If we can have a functioning tree that has healthy roots that are functioning, that tree does have the ability to adapt. It has the ability to overcome some of the stressors that are happening in the canopy by working through the roots. And really that's the closest that and help that I can give because I'm not in that zone and I really don't know what the tree owner is facing with that.
Yeah. Well, actually, that was very helpful, I think. So, one of the things I tend to do is I look at my trees or even some of my plants and I say, oh, well, I'll check it tomorrow. I'm sure it'll be better, or maybe it'll get better. I'll check next week. Oftentimes it doesn't. But so, what are some of the early warning signs people can look at in their trees that tell them they better not wait?
Okay. Well, here are some of the trouble signs that we have that I see a lot. Number one, first of all, that is a bottle tree, and that bottle tree is been stagnant for years since really planting. And so a consistent slow growth is is a warning sign that it something is going on.
Mm.
That is not normal. A tree that gets planted wants to be growing. It should put on at least 50% root growth in the first 6 months. That is the goal. And so if we have any trees that we have planted that are stunted, we want to address it immediately. That is sign that something is failing, and that is usually from the root system. Another thing that is a trouble sign is that forgotten straps and
Ah,
stakes. They really are. Now, believe it or not, this is a fig tree. This is a mature fig tree. And the homeowner called me and said, oh my gosh, my tree is all of a sudden dying. No, your tree is not all of a sudden dying. Your tree has been slowly dying for a long time because you have never removed the temporary supports or the straps. And that is a huge problem here. Our trees, if I want to go back, this is a typical new home planting here. That is how trees go into new homes here, and they come all strapped up like they're going to run away. And people just leave them. They don't think beyond the initial planting. They just think, okay, this has been done. They don't go back and monitor it. So the straps are a really big problem. And number three is ignoring canopy distress. Now, what you see here for number three, this is uh, ash tree here. We have a lot of problems with ash. They succumb to sudden ash decline. They get a sooty canker. This could happen from drought. Their sheer structure, if they're not pruned early in life to open up that canopy so that all of this branching in here has room to grow. So instead of just saying, oh, well, my tree will just work its way out, just ignoring that the tree is actually giving you cries for help. And then also the number 4 is standing water. Any standing water is a problem. This homeowner, this was a very, very mature palm tree. And if you notice, it actually has, it's on the same irrigation as the landscape shrubs. And this homeowner thought that this was flood irrigation. And this was happening to this tree 3 times a day, every single day. And even during winter, you can see that there's actual moss growing on the base. So any standing water is actually a death trap for your roots.
Yeah, wow, these are great examples. Thank you for sharing those with us. Now, what about I call myth busting? Things that people think are true but aren't necessarily true. Help us with this.
Okay, so trees are inherently self-sufficient. What I do or don't do to my tree really doesn't matter. This is crazy. This is crazy, but this is what we have. This is the mentality. Our number 1 problem over here, number 1, this is a typical soil in North Las Vegas here. That is all clay. It is
Yeah.
paste. They don't amend their soil regularly. They expect that area around is just going to magically become conducive to root growth. And what happens is we put this pretty little plant that's in its growing matter into the ground. We do nothing around the side. And how do you expect roots to grow and open up into a soil that looks like that? And see how overly saturated it is?
Yeah.
Number 2 is we love to do home renovations around here. And so we just wonderfully, this homeowner had a bottle tree that did a lawn conversion and wanted to expand their patio and put concrete slabs. So the root system was completely encased in concrete, creating a reflective heat. No way to amend the soil, no way to monitor water. And the other real quick thing I want to talk about concrete on top of roots out here. This is very, very common. And people don't understand that roots don't chase water.
Mm.
Roots only grow where there's water present in the soil. They're not heat-seeking missiles that will go and find where water is. So if you have a layer of concrete above your trees, what do you think is going to happen? That condensation, all of these fine feeder roots are going to be just hanging out right underneath the concrete, and they will do whatever they can to absorb. But if you have imperfections or you're going to have failure in your concrete that way too. Number 3 is that isolated and stressed tree. This picture here of this beautiful Chinese pistache is not going to sustain a longevity that
Mm.
is going to be beautiful. This tree is isolated. It is in reflective heat and sun. It has a little curbing, and in there, 1 little 2-gallon per hour. Actually, that was an adjustable. They thought they were doing a good job with the adjustable. But trees are social. They want to have a community. We know that in the forest, if one tree fails, the other roots of other trees go to help support it. So that is a tree can't live like that. And then on number 4, this is a young tree in a new landscape with high, chucky rock, and it does not allow for root growth. there's absolutely no water filtration there. And you can actually see where the water just tumbles right off the rock and just will now pile up at that curbing. So those are some myths that we have to debunk. Trees are not inherently self-sufficient.
Yeah, it's interesting. Most, 2, 3, and 4 cover a common theme here, right? When I look at those photos, I I get thirsty and hot just looking at them.
I am too, as a matter of fact.
So, how about pruning techniques? Can this really do damage to your tree if somebody doesn't know
Okay,
what they're doing?
well, here we go. The wrong pruning technique. It affects a tree long term, its health and its structure. People don't understand aesthetics versus physiology. Up here, this palm and this has been actually defrond. This is a chronic pruning that happens, and they think that we're doing hurricane pruning. We don't need to do hurricane pruning here. But what happens is that we actually remove all the chlorophyll and what the palm tree needs to survive. And
Mm.
so as we remove these outer palm fronds, we actually cut our way in closer to that palm heart, which is located right here. When we invade that and we get too close, we open ourselves up to insects, disease, and bad pruning practices. And that disease is carried from that palm to the next palm because our tree companies do not understand or have the labor. And I want to be kind. They just may not be able to have the capacity to get the job done well. But they got to clean their tools and it's not happening. So they're spreading disease from one to another. And
Mm.
we don't need to cyclone or hurricane. We don't get them here. We have high winds, but we understand that the tree builds its fibers and its ability to fight that wind. The more that it's exposed, we do a disservice when we do that. Secondly, sunburnt to death. This homeowner right here, they were in a fight with their neighbors. This African sumac was dropping litter to the neighbors and they had to cut it back. You can see they had large branches. Well, eventually what happened is that tree became sunburned and now the tree is dead. So aggressively pruning leads to sunburn, which is fatal. And now this is a butchered neighborhood. I have to tell you, this is four of a whole neighborhood that had the same landscaper. We have a mesquite, we have an African sumac, we have a palo verde, we have a shoestring acacia, and they were all victims um, of an unskilled tree topper. And this, even to add, this happened, this was in end of October that I did a house call. So these trees not having anything to sustain their life. And this is just bad practice. This is never acceptable. And forever these trees will have a problem putting on the canopy that they need for the roots to survive. So the roots will continue to decline now, and the trees will die.
Yeah. Boy, that's tough to see, right? That's bad for the whole neighborhood.
So,
Um,
so
so
bad.
so once a tree starts to go bad or has a bad prune, can you give us an example of one maybe that you saved, one that wasn't doing so well that you
Sure.
and the
Quickly.
and the
So
process you did? Yeah.
So this was a really, really big challenge. Here was a whole wall of mature Italian cypress, and you can see here that they just were absolutely discolored and declining, and the rest of the landscape was really doing well. This was in a raised wall, so this wall was actually about 6 feet high. And what I quickly learned was that the cypress were being overwatered. They were being overwatered because that planter was retaining so much moisture,
Mm.
but they the homeowner was focusing on the other trees and shrubs that they had in that planter. And the Italian cypress are Mediterranean. They don't need a lot of water. They need a moist soil that drains well, and they need a lot of oxygen in the soil. And when Italian cypress is on the same line as other varieties of trees, we run into a lot of problems. And then we get secondary issues where we get mites. This is a bad mite infestation that it had. And then on further observation, I saw that they actually had the start of borers. And so it was really, really a puzzle to get to the end result. But what we had to do is we had to really work on precision irrigation. Because they were on the same line, we had to focus on lowering the output of the water for the cypress, spreading that out, educating the homeowner on longer, deeper irrigation that was going to benefit the whole landscape. We had to use a systemic borer treatment, which I believe in when a tree is functioning. If a tree is not functioning, we don't throw chemicals down on the ground. The roots can't take it up. But these trees were in a good enough condition. There was enough new growth on them that I felt confident. And then finally, for the spider mites, just weekly hosing down the tree. Here in Las Vegas, Nevada, we have so much dust and wind that our mite problem is huge. And we don't get cold enough to kill out a huge amount of the population. So since we're not getting cold enough, we're taking populations from one season to the next. So just spraying out the cypress once a week in the summertime really helped. And you can see the color turned around, and it was not very long until we had improvement in the cypress.
Yeah, wow. That's really a good tip about hosing down the Italian cypress.
Any of your Mediterranean or your evergreens, the evergreens, remember, they have to function every day. They're
Yeah,
forever green. So if they're in their extreme temperatures and they're constantly having to pump water and transpire and all of that, they get tired and weak. When they get tired and weak, the insect populations have the ability to recognize that. The trees send out a pheromone. The insects really go, oh, I've got a willing participant, and they just take over. So we can do a lot out here with just a hosing down of the trees.
yeah. Interesting. So we've got one guest here that's asking, do you have a recommendation for the systemic borer treatment? Do you have a specific chemical or?
So yes, I still believe in imidacloprid. I don't know how many of you are viewing from the state of Nevada. State of Nevada has a little bit of a our boundaries on how we can use imidacloprid has been tightened in on us. We can no longer use it as a foliar spray. Absolutely not. We can use it safely as a soil drench. And so I like, and our over-the-counter imidacloprids that are available to us are licensed and they are appropriate for over-the-counter. Now, you can still get your tree company imidacloprid if you wanted to call a tree company and have it in a contractor grade, but the homeowner can still find products for for the borers.
Yeah,
And that's really our best approach, except for early, sorry, except for early taking care of. That has never happened. Nobody knew there was still a phone that rang. So early care of the tree helps with that a lot.
yeah. That's great. Great suggestion. Thank you. And Vera says thank you as well too. Um, Look, is there three things that every homeowner should do to protect their trees and help them thrive this summer?
Absolutely. Number one, learn their basic needs. understand their size, their sun, and their thirst. This homeowner actually went through a lawn conversion and they did the proper preparation. They soaked those trees. They had plenty of time to do it. They put down the subsurface irrigation. They knew exactly how much water they were going to need. They actually run their subsurface irrigation for about 2 hours at a time when they do run it. But this is just to show that we can maintain our very, very large trees. A lot of preparation goes into that. We need to know what it is to be able to maintain it. Number two is prioritize soil health. This homeowner had a mature pine in their backyard, and I was actually watching the pine beetles crawl out of it.
Oh,
And this is not soil. This is compacted. I don't even know what it is. It's just terrible. They didn't maintain organic matter. They didn't even put down irrigation. But because the home was mature, they thought, oh, well, the tree will just live. So prioritize soil health. Address the soil early spring and early fall. Get ready for that next season. And then finally, protect the trunk, especially in young trees. These smooth barked trees don't have a canopy yet. They'll get them. They'll get them. But until then, we need to protect it. So if that means using a tree paint or even meaning a tree tape or burlap or something, protect it and remove all straps. The stakes that are there are strictly for transport. If you have to strap, we strap at the top 2/3 of the canopy. We let that tree move side. We build that core and those fibers.
very nice. Very good tips. And yeah, I always wondered about painting the trunks. It really is important and works.
It is. There is one product that we sell that's on the in the market that says dilute if necessary. I am telling you, it is necessary. We never just paint our trees. We do a water wash. We monitor. That's the thing. We're monitoring. We're nurturing. We are the keeper of these trees. You know, we absolutely, don't you love this? So the Lorax, unless someone cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. I say go ahead for it. Plant that truffula tree. Just take care of it. You know, you're starting something that is going to take a lot of investment and a lot of time, but we want it to be here for a really, really long time. So protect it, learn everything you can about it, because you are the one that's the keeper of the tree, and it really matters.
Boy, that is such good advice and encouragement. Thank you so much. And Joy, you have been just a wealth of information today. I can tell by the engagement from our viewers that they really enjoyed this
Oh,
and really learned. I know I did. So I want to especially thank you for joining us and being so generous and sharing this information. I mean, this is a lot of experience, a lot of travel time, a lot of time out in the sun to learn all this. So thank you for sharing with us. Now, if somebody has a additional question or wants you to come out for a house call, how can they get a hold of you?
well, our house calls are you go into a local Star Nursery location, you purchase your house call in advance, and we do have house calls that happen in the outer market, which is Pahrump. We have Mesquite, Utah. We're in Arizona. House calls can happen there. I don't go out to Mesquite, or I don't, but we have our Dr. Q's experts that do. But my email is there, and you guys can email me any questions that you have. But if you're in the Las Vegas area and you just want to go in and purchase your house call in advance, I will contact you to schedule your house call.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
for
great.
up to an hour. So we get a lot done in that hour. a lot. We go from plant to plant. We look for irrigation concerns. You name it. We discuss timing, nutrients, all of it.
And not to mention Star Nursery, what a wealth of plants, irrigation, fertilizers, and
That's right.
they're all the locations are just fabulous to go in, and you will learn, and everything you need really to have a healthy yard is there. So
And our staff is unbelievable. They are part of the Nevada Nurseryman program. So you look for this little Nevada pin. This means that they have gone through, they are certified, they are your local experts. It's great for me to be able to go, but when you want hands-on information, take a picture, good pictures. Take a picture of the whole tree. Focus in on things that you make you concerned. Take a picture of the soil in the area around. Bring them into our experts, or any of your nurseries in any part of the country, wherever you are. Bring in as much information as you can. It's going to help them, and be ready to talk about the history of the tree or
yeah,
your shrubs, and really get to the source of when the problem happened, because it wasn't all of a sudden. These are
yeah,
things that have been brewing for a long time. It was just all of a sudden that the tree said, I just am done. I just can't do this anymore.
yeah. No, and that's a great point. One thing about our industry is people really want to help, and give them the opportunity, and they'll help. So that's a great point, Joey. So thank you again for joining us. To all our viewers, thank you for spending some of your Wednesday with us. I know we're really getting into the season, and so these hours are getting more valuable. So thanks for spending some time with us. Remember, you can see all the webinars that we've done at Water Connections at husqvarnawater.com now, and they're always free, and they're there for your enjoyment. So anyway, thanks again, Joey. Thanks to all our visitors, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.